So yeah, quid pro quo is in the news a little bit these days. It's a Latin term, quid pro quo, which means something for something else or something like that. And it's a bribery thing. And so there's a lot of talk about it in US politics now with Trump and his impeachment trial. In Israel as well, the politics there is all about the bribery scandals, or so-called scandals around Bibi receiving cigars or positive media. But I'm not going to talk about any of that. I'm not a current events type of person, and generally I believe that in a place of Torah learning, there are certain topics that you shouldn't go into. Things that are divisive, controversial, you shouldn't speak about in a shul. Things like politics, religion, these things have to be just left out of the synagogue, I think. And so I'm going to I'm not going to discuss them. And in fact, my interest in this topic was nothing to do with what's in the news. It was actually just a personal interaction that I had with somebody who asked me a halachic question. Somebody who I know came to me asking me if a certain form of what seems to be bribery is permissible in a business context. The situation was like this, that he was asking if he runs a business where he sells products to big companies. So he sells, like tech products, for example, to Kmart and to Groupon and to various different big businesses around. And he's in competition with other suppliers. And so he wants to know, can he bribe the buyers who represent these big companies to buy from him? That was his question. And I said, well, bribery is prohibited in the Torah. It's very clear that the Torah prohibits bribery. He says, okay, but this is in a business setting. It's different to bribery that's spoken around the Torah. This is a business setting. This is the way business is done. So you get a buyer who comes and who is interested in the product, but they can buy this same product in 100 different places. But if I maybe slip them a couple of $1,000 as a thank you, or showing appreciation, so maybe they'll buy from me rather than other places. And I said, well, bribery is bribery. I mean, how could you possibly justify such a thing? The Torah is pretty clear about it, and the Torah is black and white. Things are either prohibited or permitted, and bribery is prohibited. And he said to me, if I'm not mistaken, he said to me, you're building a shul, right? I said, yeah. And you're a few $100,000 short, aren't you? I said, yeah, that's true. And he said, well, if my business goes well, I could probably help you. So I said, the Torah is nuanced. And sometimes things are not as clear as they seem. And you have to research things further. You should never jump to conclusions. Just because something says is prohibited, it doesn't mean it's actually prohibited in every single scenario. And I told him, I'll do a bit of research and I'll get back to you. So that's where we got here today. And this is the real question I want to look at. Bribery in the case of business. And can you bribe somebody, in this exact case, bribe a buyer to be your customer as opposed to anybody else's? And it's fascinating where we got. Through this, we'll see the whole sort of history of bribery in Jewish law and its various applications. And the starting point does have to be in the Torah. The verse in the Torah itself is repeated several times, the prohibition to take a bribe. It says, do not take a bribe because bribes blind the wise and twists the words of the just. So says the Torah. In a rare case here, the Torah actually gives a reasoning. Often there's prohibitions. Don't steal. It doesn't say why not to steal. But when it's talking about bribery, it says why not to give a bribe. Because a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and twists the words of the just. So this prohibition is pretty clear. Rashi, the great commentary on the Torah, explains that when the Torah says you shall not take bribes, it is talking to a judge. But it's talking even for a judge who's going to judge truthfully. So one side bribes him, but he's still going to judge according to justice. He says, I'm not going to be swayed by the judgment. Even so, even if a judge says such a thing, we still say you cannot take a bribe because the Torah already has a separate prohibition about judging unfairly. There's a separate statement the Torah says that a judge has to be fair. That we understand. And the Torah says, and don't take a bribe, even if you're going to be fair. Why? Because the Torah gives its reasons, because you think you're going to be fair, but it's not really possible to be. Once you've been bribed, once somebody has slipped you some type of favor, so then you cannot possibly look at things in a clear way. And so, indeed, the Gemara says the same thing. The Gemara in Ksubas, the sage Rava says, what's the rationale behind the prohibition of bribery? Because when you accept a bribe from a litigant, again, we're talking here about a judge, so you become close to that litigant. You have now a relationship, a connection with that litigant, and you as the judge become the litigant. You become him. Meaning the way you're looking at things is not from an outsider perspective. You're not objective anymore. You have received a favor, and so therefore you feel a connection, and therefore you become a litigant, not a judge anymore. In fact, the Rava says this is hinted at in the very word in Hebrew for bribe. The word is shochad. And the Talmud says, Rava in the Talmud says that shochad is a diminishment of two words, shehu chad, that you become one with the person who gave you the bribe. You're not a judge anymore. You're one with the litigant. Shehu chad. You become one, and therefore you're not looking at things clearly. And we're told that bribery does not necessarily have to take the form of cash. It could take any form of any favor, anything at all. Even words. If somebody previously would not have necessarily greeted you, but now they greet you and speak kindly of you, flatter you, that's a form of bribery. If they offer a favor that's not actual money, just to lend things to you that they wouldn't have done otherwise, all of that is considered bribery. Any favor, any advantage, it is considered a form of bribe and would invalidate the judge. And so a judge who has received a bribe has to recuse himself from that particular case. I cannot judge, I have a connection. Even if when they received the bribe, they didn't know they were receiving a bribe. So they received a gift from somebody, and then later a case came before them and that person was a litigant. So at the time they received the gift, it was valid. I'm just receiving a gift from you. Now all of a sudden you're appearing before me. Now I know I've been bribed. I cannot judge this case. I'm out of it. Correct. So it is very clear from all of these sources that bribery is forbidden, but it's talking about in the case of judgment, in a court case of Jewish law. That's where the Torah's prohibition appears, speaking to a judge. Interestingly, the prohibition is to receive a bribe. Lo sikach sheikha, it says you should not take a bribe. What about giving a bribe? Is that prohibited? It actually doesn't say that. It doesn't say in the Torah, don't give a bribe. It says, don't receive a bribe. So giving's all right? Well, that wouldn't make sense. If it's a prohibited act, so the judge cannot receive it. But am I transgressing by giving it? So here the sages say a blanket statement, and that is that any time a person participates in another person's sin, that is prohibited. No matter what it is. If I am selling food that's not kosher, I can't say, well, I mean, that's not I'm not eating it. You're the one eating it. I'm just selling it. I am participating in your sin. This comes under the category of loisiten michshal, lifnei iv loisiten michshal. You should not put a stumbling block before the blind. The Torah has a prohibition. You shouldn't put a stumbling block before the blind. Meaning, if a blind person is walking down the street, don't put something in front of them they're going to trip on. Now, that prohibition is a little bit obvious. The sages say, of course, no one would think that you would be allowed to trip over a blind person. Obviously, the Torah is speaking in symbolic languages. You shouldn't put something in front of somebody that will make them stumble spiritually. You shouldn't cause another person to spiritually fall by allowing them to sin. So therefore, if you are aiding and abetting a sin by bribing a judge, and they're receiving the bribe and therefore transgressing, you're also transgressing. Not that prohibition, a different one, putting a stumbling block before a blind. So certainly, both the giver and the receiver are transgressing. It's totally forbidden to give or to receive a bribe. But who are we talking about? We're talking about a judge in a Jewish court. The Torah does not directly apply this law to anyone else. So can we extend the prohibition of bribery beyond a Beth Din, a Jewish court? So, yes. The answer is yes. The first expansion we'll do is a non-Jewish court. Can you bribe a non-Jewish judge? Putting aside for a moment non-Jewish law, we know that there's a general thing that we are not allowed to transgress the law of the land. And so if it's illegal in secular law, we can't transgress that. But let's put that aside for a moment. Is there a halachic direct prohibition to bribe a secular court, a secular judge? So, yes, there is. There is. The halachic authorities bring the fact that in Torah law, one of the 7 laws of the children of Noah, of all of mankind, is to set up fair court systems. That there's a Torah commandment for all nations, not just Jewish people, all nations to set up a fair set of laws and a system to apply those laws. So if we, as a Jewish person, bribe a non-Jewish court, that is, again, that is undermining the justice system of the non-Jewish world, which we can't do. We have to encourage there to be a fair system of law. To bribe a non-Jewish court would be just as prohibited. So even the direct prohibition in the Torah is bribing the Jewish court, because it's talking about Jewish law, but certainly bribing a non-Jewish judge would also be totally prohibited. Having said that, we all know stories throughout history of Jewish people bribing non-Jewish judges. I'm talking about in the distant past, of course, not anyone we know or any present company, but there were times when that was the norm. That was the way you survived. In Tsarist Russia, to bribe the judge, it was almost expected. Like, if you didn't do it, it would be a little bit strange. It's like that Monty Python skit of the guy who buys something in the marketplace and doesn't bargain for it, and the shopkeeper says, well, you're just going to pay the full thing, you have to bargain. So in a similar way, the judge, if you didn't come with a bribe, it would be unusual in certain times. That was because we lived, most of our history, most of Jewish history, we lived under tyrannical regimes with unfair, corrupt court systems, and that was the system. So in such a case, to basically survive, to save life, to be able to maintain a Jewish community, you had to bribe. That was the way it was done. And so therefore, in such a case, that wouldn't come under the prohibition of undermining a fair justice system. It wasn't a fair justice system. It was survival. So bribes were permissible then. I even myself, I visited the Ukraine when I was studying to be a rabbi, so we're going back 25 years ago. And there, bribery was the norm. The way to get around was bribery, to bribe police officers, to all authorities. I remember I was working at a school there, Jewish school, during Pesach, and we wanted to take the kids for a trip during Chol HaMoed. There were a few days in between the intermediate days of the festival. So we took them on a trip to Odessa, the beautiful city of Odessa. It was a 10-hour bus ride from Vinica, the village where I was in, to take them to Odessa. And we only had a couple of days to do this. It was a short trip, and for these kids, this was the only trip they'd had in their life. They'd never been out of their homes. They'd never seen any other part, even of Ukraine. So they were extremely excited. However, for us to go to Odessa and back by bus, 10 hours each way, it meant we had to travel through the night. The bus would leave late at night and get there in the morning, which is no big deal, but there is a law in the Ukraine that buses are not allowed to travel on the highways at night. A strict law. So how did we get around this? The bus driver drove. We were stopped by the police every couple of hours. And we took out a little stick of margarine that we brought from America, offered it to the policeman. He said, thank you very much. And we kept going. And every couple of hours we did that. And either a stick of margarine, grape juice, a bottle of grape juice was a big commodity. This is in the late 90s in Ukraine. And certainly a bottle of vodka would have been fine. Not only that, I had a dream to take home a police hat from one of the Ukrainian policemen. And so on the last night before we left, I asked a policeman, could I buy your hat? And he said, it's my uniform. And I said, but I want to take it back, as a souvenir. He said, how much? And I offered him the equivalent of $5 American and a bottle of Sprite. He looked at me and said, hang on a minute. He went back to somewhere and came out with a hat, and for $5 and a bottle of Sprite, I got a policeman's hat off the policeman on duty. So that's the norm. That was the total norm in those days. So such bribery to get yourself out of trouble from a corrupt authority that is not going to be fair to you, that was permissible in certain times in history. I would not apply that today. In the countries where most of us live, we live in places where the systems are, generally speaking, fair and just, with balances and correct systems and processes. So therefore, today would not be permissible to bribe a secular court or a policeman or council or any other authority to get through what you need. That would certainly be true. However, here we're still talking about judgment, government type of systems. Can we apply this any further than that? So there's an interesting statement by the Ramah. The Ramah is Ramosha Isserlis. He was from the 16th century Poland, great halachic authority of the Ashkenazi world. And he writes in his glosses on Shulchan Aruch, on the Code of Jewish Law, that any appointee to public office can be disqualified by the same disqualifications as a rabbinical judge. So, in his words, those appointed to deal with public matters are considered judges, and it is therefore forbidden to appoint somebody who is disqualified because of his sinfulness. So just like a judge, for example, if a judge had been found to have committed something illegal or a crime, then that judge is not valid to be a judge. So the Ramah says a very fascinating thing. Anyone who is in public office in the community is judged by the same level of scrutiny as a judge in the court, in the Jewish court, and therefore any wrongdoing that they've done would invalidate them from a position of public office, of community authority. If we'd be strict about that, we might not find anybody to hold any position of community leadership, but so says the Ramah. Now, expanding that idea, if anyone in public office has the same level of scrutiny as a judge in the court, so the Aruch HaShulchan, who was a slightly later authority, Rabbi Michael Epstein, he was late 1800s in Lithuania, in his work, Aruch HaShulchan, he specifically mentions bribery in this context. And he says the following fascinating statement. Not only the judge is enjoined from receiving bribery, but all officials and persons involved in public matters, even though their decisions do not have the status of the law of Torah, are forbidden to be biased in any matter as a result of friendship or hostility, and all the more so by taking bribery. So that would mean that a school board, let's say, if somebody's on the board accepting people admissions in school, and someone says, "Look, I really want my kid to get into your school. Here's a little gift." That would be bribery that is prohibited according to Aruch HaShulchan. That's Torah law, prohibited to do such a thing, and to give it or to receive it would be completely prohibited. Any favor or gift given in order to receive something will be prohibited, even if it's not a Torah law. There's no Torah law being decided here. It's not a judge, but it is a communal position, and that has to be held up. An application of that, a fascinating and very controversial one, was made by the Chassam Sofer. Chassam Sofer was Moshe Schreiber. He was the chief rabbi of Bratislava, Slovakia, in the early 1800s, and he's considered one of the luminaries of Torah thought from those times. So he had a very complicated question that was posed to him, and this is where community politics comes into the question of bribery. He says the following: a certain community came together to appoint a new rabbi. Already controversial. There were 4 candidates who the community were interested in. And so the way they were going to decide between the 4 candidates for the new rabbi is that they would put the names of each of those 4 candidates on a piece of paper, put the pieces of paper in a hat, and pick a name out of the hat. That would not determine who the rabbi is. They would then, as a community, vote on that candidate, whether you want him or you don't want him, yes or no. If a majority said yes, he'd be the rabbi. If a majority did not say yes, so then they would pick another name out of the hat. 3 are left in the hat. And they would vote on him. Again, if a majority says yes, he's the rabbi. If no, then they keep going, the 3rd or the 4th. That was the way they were going to choose the rabbi. Now, let's pause for a moment. I read that and I thought, what a strange system. Wouldn't you think of an easier way of doing it?
Maybe
Who has the mathematical advantage?
The favourites, you might as well line them up.
Well, the first has an advantage that he has the first chance. Like, the second, third, and fourth didn't even have a chance to be voted on yet. The first guy's being voted on. He might get the majority, but maybe number two would have got a bigger majority. So it seems a bit... The first one definitely has the biggest chance to be voted in. So it seems like a bit of an odd system. What would be a better system to do? Just elections. Just elections. There's elections. There's four candidates elect. So why do it in such a convoluted way? You take a name out of the hat, then we vote yes or no. It seemed like a strange thing. Then I thought about it, and I think actually that's quite a brilliant system. Yeah, because let's say they did it in a normal election, right? So you had four candidates and everyone can choose. So let's, for argument's sake, say there's 1,000 people in the community and there's four candidates. So let's say one candidate got 400 votes, one candidate got 300, one got 200, and one got 100. Right? So who wins? Who wins the election? The guy who got 400 votes. Which means a minority of the community wanted this rabbi. Can you imagine what a time that rabbi's going to have now? The majority of the community did not want him, did not vote for him. And a minority wanted him. What chance has this guy got? 600 people said no to this guy, and only 400 said yes.
Preferential system.
So instead of that, this is what they came up with: that each candidate should have a chance for everyone to say either I want him or I don't want him. And that way, whoever wins, the majority of the community said I want him. He had a majority. Now the trick here is that we got four candidates. So they randomly chose one name out of the hat. This guy's going to get the first chance. And they were obviously all four valid candidates that people were happy with. All four of them could be the rabbi, but the question is, do you want him or not? So if the first guy wins, a majority of people said they want him. So he's got a majority following in the community. That would be good enough. Maybe another way they could have done it to achieve that same result is vote for each one, yes or no. You know, you have to vote for each one. Will I have him as my rabbi or not? And then the one who got the most yeses could go in. Maybe they could have done that, but that may be too complicated. I don't know. Anyway, this is the way they did it. And I think also this is based on the halachic validity of majority. That we know in Torah law, majority has an extremely big power. If majority of the community voted this person in, they're in. So they needed a majority, not just the biggest number of votes. Anyway, this was the system they did. What happened? The first name was taken out, and he did not get a majority. So they picked out a second name, who also did not get a majority. The third name they picked out did get a majority, and so he was chosen as the rabbi. The fourth guy didn't even get a chance. But so it happened. Anyway, as always, the story doesn't end there. After this was announced and the rabbis won and he's appointed, a rumor started spreading in the community that several members of the community had received cash bribes from relatives of this candidate who won from his hometown to vote him in. Whether that because they didn't want him back in the hometown or we don't know. So the rumors were swirling around the community that people had been bribed to vote for candidate number 3 who won. Then a sealed letter was discovered. In those days, a letter was sealed with the stamps, and the sealed letter was addressed to the brother of the winning candidate back in his hometown from a local person from the community. And because of the rumors that were going around, there was suspicion that there's some juicy stuff in this letter. We've got to open this letter. And so it was opened. And in it, the community member was writing to the brother back in the hometown of the rabbi, saying, confirming that you received the money that was to come to me in order to vote for your brother. And please ensure that the rest of the money comes across for the other people in the community to vote for your brother. So the letter was confirming the bribery story, it seems. So now the community is completely split in fighting and shouting at each other. Rabbi Moshe Schreiber, the Chassam Sofer, says they've come to me with the question, what do we do now? The community is split into two. I'm standing here trying to keep the peace and prevent a major war fighting coming out in the community and come up with some type of compromise to honor the Torah and peace in the community. So what do we do? So the Chassam Sofer fascinatingly says that in such a case, if there are two witnesses who can testify that bribes were given, and these witnesses have to be people not from the community and not related to people in the community or to the rabbi back from his place. If there are two witnesses, then it's clear that the vote is not valid. So his first point is, we cannot base anything on hearsay or rumors. We need testimony that this happened. Testimony means two witnesses who are themselves objective, not a part of the story, not community members who back this rabbi or that rabbi, not relatives of community members who are involved in the dispute, not relatives of the rabbi or any of the rabbis. It has to be so basically you had to have a wayfarer, a visitor that was passing through town, who eyewitness saw the exchange of bribes to be able to say bribery is happening here. You need testimony. Why would that conclude that this vote is completely invalid? Because people have to express their opinions with pure intentions, and here the voting was under the influence of bribery, which aligns you to the one who gave the bribe. Shochad, we said, you become one with the one who gave you the bribe. So if one side is bribing, so then there's not pure intentions. And again, here we're talking, it's interesting the way he words that voting, generally speaking, an election doesn't have to be with pure intentions. Who cares what your intentions are? If you vote for somebody for impure intentions, if you vote for somebody because they're giving you a lot of benefits, if you vote for somebody because you hate somebody else, generally speaking in elections we don't talk about pure intentions. Here we're talking about a community voting in a rabbi. And so the intentions have to be pure. You have to be saying, I want him as our spiritual leader and guide of the community. I want this person to be determining the direction of our community, giving guidance and inspiration and answering our questions and supporting us. The intentions have to be pure. And so as soon as there is bribery, the intentions are no longer pure. And so that invalidates the vote. That is certainly true. And so he says further, not only when they voted in this rabbi, the third rabbi, but also when they rejected the other rabbis in the first two votes. When they did that, they had money in mind. They weren't saying this person is not the right candidate. They said, no, we're waiting for our candidate to be picked because we've been bribed to vote for him. So therefore he says, let's see if you follow this one. Even if it was a small number of people in the community who received bribes, and there still would have been a majority, if you would take their votes out, there'd still be a majority who voted in this rabbi number 3. It could be argued that still the vote is invalid, because after a block of people voted down the first two rabbis, the momentum was against them, and by the time you got to the third rabbi, people said, well, what choice do we have? There's only 2 left. We're not going to say no to everybody. And so people may have been influenced to vote yes, just to get this rabbi in, because we've knocked down 2 already. In other words, it seems like the expectation in this vote was, we're really picking out of a hat. That's what we're really doing. Because we've got 4 valid candidates for rabbi. But in order for it to be confirmed, not just by random chance, but by the community buying into this rabbi, so we're doing it with an election. And so we're taking out a name, and as long as the majority of the community are saying, yes, we want this guy, we want him, so then he's in. But because there's a block of people here, it's not the majority of the community that were bribed, but it's a group of people who said no. And the no, I don't know how the voting was done, if people said no, or they wrote on a piece of paper exactly, but it sounds like people were influenced as well by, there's a lot of no's. There's a lot of people against this guy. So even if it's not the majority of people, that's going to influence people unduly, unfairly, to maybe vote against this person or abstain. And therefore, the first 2 rabbis lost the vote in an unfair way. And by the time the third one got in, why did he get in? Not because the majority of the community are bribed, because a bunch of people were bribed to say no to him and yes to him. So flock mentality, mob mentality, people sort of just follow what's going. If everyone seems to be saying yes to this guy, no to them, people end up following. And so it's just not fair. This vote is not fair, it's not a valid vote, and therefore if we can prove through testimony that there is bribery here, no question, it is an invalid vote.
Even if the rabbi didn't know anything about it?
We'll speak about that in a minute. At the moment, there's no indication that the rabbi is himself involved in the bribery. No indication at all. But all we're saying is, people are not voting with their conscience, they're not voting with their opinion, or what they really think, they're not doing l'shem shemaim, his words are, for pure intentions, so therefore it invalidates the vote. Doesn't matter who caused the bribery. He also quotes the Ramah that we mentioned earlier, that equates anyone working in a position of community responsibility to a judge. It has the same rules as a judge, and therefore says that the entire vote here is null and void, just like a judge who received payment. There's even a law that says a judge shouldn't receive payment, not bribery, payment for what they're doing. A judge has to do it l'shem shemayim. Now, of course, we do have to pay for judges' time that they're missing out and that type of thing, but generally speaking, judges are not supposed to be doing it for money, because then they may extend the judgment, make it longer, or it may not be fair. So here as well, people who are voting for payment, that is invalid, and it should be null and void, the entire thing. Now, continues the Chatam Sofer, if we have witnesses, again, we're only basing this on testimony, we've got to have witnesses. If there are witnesses that the rabbi himself was behind the bribing, that he initiated this whole thing, not just his relatives or friends or supporters, but he himself was involved, so then he's completely disqualified for being a rabbi, here or anywhere else, until he repents. We do believe in tshuva and repentance. Somebody who's done wrong can make amends. They have to publicly admit what they've done and show that they would never do such a thing again. But until such a case, he would be invalid for having a position of leadership, because he's the one who initiated the bribes. Now, on the other hand, if we don't have witnesses that the rabbi himself was aware or involved in this bribery, but his family were doing it on his behalf, then we have to give him the presumption of innocence. Every person is presumed innocent until proven guilty. And so just because somebody's followers or family are involved with something corrupt does not immediately make him guilty. He is innocent until proven guilty, and so therefore we will assume that he didn't know about this. He was just an innocent candidate wanting to be the rabbi there, and therefore he maintains it. Because after all, the community chose him as one of the candidates, meaning he's already gone through a whole screening. They've interviewed him, they've spoken to him, they've met him, they've watched this guy. He's not a random person who's put himself up. The community has already appointed him at least as a candidate, so therefore we assume he's innocent and righteous and a good person unless proven guilty. Now, as for the recipients of the bribery, so they have become disqualified from any public office. They received bribes, which we said in any communal responsibility. Voting is also a communal responsibility. That's giving you a position when you have a vote. So if you accepted a bribe to vote somebody in a community position, so then you have become invalidated, just like a judge is invalidated as a judge, you become invalidated as any communal influence. So those people would not be allowed to participate in the revote. If there was a new vote that was made, the people who accepted bribes cannot be a part of it. The rabbi could stand again as long as we haven't proven him to be a part of the bribery, but the people who participated cannot even participate in the next vote. Even if they return the money, even if they said, I'll give the money back. Once you've taken a bribe, you've become invalidated for that position unless you make tshuva. In fact, he says here that they would have to make an oath to never repeat such actions. Make a shivul, an actual oath that they would never take a bribe again, then they could be accepted again. But here, why we said before, the rabbi, if he participated in the bribery directly, and we've proven that, in such a case, he's invalid to be a rabbi, he cannot stand, he cannot be a part of it, unless he repents. If he repents, does tshuva, makes an oath he would never do such a thing again, and we believe he's sincere, we would allow him again. However, the people who received bribes, even if they repent and make an oath, cannot participate in the revote. They can't be a part of the voting again. Why not? Why could the rabbi, who himself initiated the bribery, why would he be allowed, if he repents, to participate in and be voted in? But the people who received the bribery, even if they've repented, even if they've made an oath, cannot be a part of the vote anymore. Why? They're still biased. They're still biased. The connection has already been made. Once the gift has been given, the connection has been made. These people are not impartial. Now, they're one with this guy. So even if they return the money, they'll never do it again. Once the bribe has been given, that person is not valid to judge. Fascinating. Okay, but all of this discussion has been assuming that we have eyewitnesses. We have witnesses to the bribery. Now, generally speaking, bribery will very rarely be done in front of witnesses. It's usually not something that you do in public or with the passers-by just watching. It's usually done undercover, which, by the way, is the reason why it's very rare for there to be a punishment for bribery. We know that Torah law only allows punishment where testimony exists, where there's eyewitness testimony that a sin was done. We can't punish somebody for something that we don't have testimony for. And so it does say that if a judge is suspected of bribery, so then we may suspend their judgment, but to actually give it a punishment, it would be quite difficult. And so here, we're saying that there has to be eyewitness testimony to invalidate this whole election. What do we do? So it says, all this is only where there are witnesses, but without testimony, they have no right to strip the rabbi of his position. He won the vote and he's been voted in. Even if people admit that they received bribes, they have to return the money, but it doesn't invalidate the vote. Again, the people admit, yeah, we were bribed. Okay, so you have to return the money. But, okay, so then if you're bribed, so then doesn't that invalidate the vote? No, it doesn't invalidate the vote. How could that makes no sense, no? How could that be? So there's a fascinating principle in Jewish law called palgino b'dibura, which means that you can split somebody's words and accept half of what they said for the purposes of one thing and reject it for the purposes of something else. A person has said, I received the bribe. There's a principle in Jewish law that you cannot testify against yourself. You're not impartial about yourself, so you can't be a witness about yourself. So if I come and say that I've done a sin, we don't have to believe me. You don't have to believe me in court. That doesn't stand up in court. I'm not a witness. You can't testify about yourself. So if I say I've taken a bribe, we say that's not testimony. So we don't accept that. We need an external party to testify about you, not yourself. However, one part of what you said we will accept, and that is that you are holding money that you shouldn't have. The money belongs to somebody else. For that, we'll believe you, and you have to return the money. Because you've said you've got money that doesn't belong to you. What possible gain is there for that? So you have to give it back. As far as your statement that you were bribed, maybe you were bribed to say you were bribed. Maybe the opposition of this rabbi is bribing people to say they were bribed to vote for him. How do we know? We don't know. You can't testify about yourself. So we don't know what you're saying, if it's true or not. But one thing you said is you've got money that belongs to somebody else. We'll accept that. That part we'll accept. You have to return it. Because there's no real gain for somebody saying that. But as far as being bribed, we can't accept that. And so therefore, if there's no testimony, but people are admitting they were bribed, they have to return the money, but it does not invalidate the vote. So he says we split their words and accept the fact that they have money that belongs to someone else that they must return. But do not accept that they were bribed. That's not testimony. Now then you've got a problem here. We've got to, let's say, we don't know, again, we don't really know what's happened. And this is important. Whenever we're talking about a judgment, the judge has to be completely impartial, even if things are fishy, but we don't know really what happened. Without testimony, we're not sure. So, you've got here, there were 4 valid, good candidates that the community wanted to be candidates to be a rabbi. One of them won the vote. We've now got a suspicion that it was done unfairly through bribery. But if we don't have proof of that, we can't prove it, so we cannot invalidate that person's position. We can't invalidate him and say that he's not there. However, he says that Chassam Sofer has an interesting solution that the community could have. If there's suspicion but no proof, the community could make a general excommunication on anyone who knows himself that he has been appointed by bribery and takes a position of authority based on unfair basis. So the community can say that there's a general, we're not saying any names, but we're saying anybody who knowingly takes a position that they gained through bribery, through unfair means, we excommunicate you. And it's a general statement. And that is relying on the conscience of the rabbi that if he really is behind a bribery scam, he's just been excommunicated. And only he knows that. It's between you and God, we're saying to him. If you know that there was something not fishy here, then you have to take that on your own shoulders. Now, a really corrupt person wouldn't care. So what? But we're talking here about people who, maybe there was some corruption around, but they were God-fearing as well. I mean, a person who got this far to be appointed as a rabbi of a big community, we assume that he has some fear of God. And so if he hears you're being excommunicated, if there's anything fishy here, then even if the rabbi wasn't personally involved, but he finds out or he believes that there was some unfair advantage he had, he may step down on his own accord in such a case. But that's as far as they can go, says the Chasam Sofer. Now, what about the letter that they discovered? Remember the letter that they opened? What about that? So he says that is not valid testimony. That's not good enough testimony. We don't know who's writing what for what reason. That's not an eyewitness testimony. It would not stand as evidence. And he says, and by the way, they were wrong to open it. You're not allowed to open letters that are addressed to somebody else. There's a ban from Rabbeinu Gershom, an earlier ban of opening other people's letters, and so therefore they did wrong in opening it in the first place. And that is how he dealt with that situation. So fascinatingly, what the Chasam Sofer here has done is he's applied the law of bribery to a communal case, a case of very heated community politics, but showed that it can't be based on suspicions or hearsay or rumors. We have to have clear evidence, and if it is, then it's invalidated the entire vote. But what we haven't seen yet is how we can apply this to business. Let's get down to business now. What about in the world of business, in making deals, in trying to win customers, can I bribe somebody to be my customer? Which was the original question. So here we've got something straight out of the Mishnah, going all the way back to the 1st century in the Mishnah Bava Metzia, Tractate Bava Metzia, chapter 4. It says the following. Rabbi Yehuda says, a shopkeeper may not distribute roasted seeds or nuts to children, since he thereby accustoms them to come to his shop. But the sages permit it. The Chacham and the sages permitted it. Now it seems that this is talking about a time where people would send their kids to the marketplace to go shopping for them, which I find baffling, because if I take my kids to Krinsky's, I come out with a trolley full of stuff that was not on the list and we didn't want to buy, and I would never send them on their own shopping for us. Who knows what they'd come back with. But it seems that maybe in Talmudic times, kids were different, or the world was different, and so it was a normal thing to send the kids shopping. So I've sent my kids down to the marketplace, and there's 10 different butcher shops where they could buy their meat from. And so one of the butchers is outside his shop giving out sausages was the way, yeah. In those days, it was roasted seeds or nuts. Today the kids would even look at that, but that would be a punishment. But then it was a bribe. Roasted seeds and nuts to come to my shop. Says Rabbi Yehuda, you can't do that. You can't do that because then those kids are going to come to that shop, not because that's where the best meat is, not because that's where the parents send them, because you gave them lollies, you gave them nuts and seeds. That's not fair, says Rabbi Yehuda. The sages say, it's fine. A shopkeeper can do that and there's not a problem whatsoever.
It's an incentive.
Yeah. It's an incentive. So here we have a fascinating Mishnaic debate on marketing and how permissible is that. When it says here that the sages permit it, Rabbi Yehuda is a single opinion against the sages who are the majority opinion. Therefore, majority rules, as we said, that majority has a very great strength in Torah law. If the sages permit something against one dissenting opinion, it means it is permitted. And indeed, that's codified in Shulchan Aruch.
But even if we heard it, that was a bribery or because he's taking away someone else's livelihood?
Well, yeah, but he's giving an unfair advantage. But what's the unfair advantage? It's bribery. So in other words, yeah, you got two litigants or you got two shops.
Yeah.
You want this one to win, so you're giving a gift.
But all the other merchants have the right to offer those same or similar.
So you're all on a level
Correct.
playing field.
That's what. Okay. So that's what the Gemara says. The Gemara says that argument that this is the Gemara's statement on that Mishnah says that the argument of the sages is the shopkeeper can say to the other shopkeepers, do the same. He says, I'm giving nuts, you give prunes, which apparently is even better. So back then, young people had prunes. And so it seems that the shopkeeper's argument is, I'm giving nuts, you can give something even better, give prunes and then they'll come to you. What's the problem?
Of course you get have a headache, they're going to lose by it.
Lose the prunes, you get more business. That's business. You advertise, and which costs money, and you get more business. Like you make it more enticing. That's how business goes.
It goes back to your initial example with the software guys. Like if you're all on a level playing field, your congregant's company can offer X.
Okay.
My company can offer Y. So
that's what it seems. It seems like we'd say here that every company has different enticements and incentives and ways of marketing and making them their product attractive. So just like back in those days, the guy in the market can give the seeds to the kids. Why can't I offer that to a buyer? I offer a gift. Is the kid the company? Is the little kid? So we're saying, can we compare it? Is that child an agent, or are they the buyer?
An employer is not an buyer, not an agent. If you take it for his own personal good, he's not an agent. He's paid to do his job.
Okay. Well, let's see. The Shulchan Aruch, by the way, the code of Jewish law, taking this, we can't ever say what the halacha is just from what the Mishnah and the Gemara says. We have to look at what the code of Jewish law says. How does it codify? And indeed, it codifies this law, saying that, like the sages say, it's permitted to offer seeds to the kids in order to buy in that shop. And the comparison, interestingly, in Shulchan Aruch is, it's exactly like giving a discount.
Yes.
It's the same as giving a discount. What does it mean if I give a discount? I'm basically giving you money to buy in my shop.
That's right, because you're paying not the kids, the parents. They're giving a discount. If you're giving a bribe to a buyer, that's not going to the entity that's buying the goods.
Okay, you're saying that the seeds and the nuts are the same as a discount, whereas a gift to the buyer is not the same as a discount because the buyer, meaning the owner of the money, is not receiving the benefit. Okay, but you could argue that the kid is not the parent, and the kid getting the nuts is not the parent getting more meat for his money.
Is a discount allowed? It's not ridiculous.
You can give a discount. You're allowed to give a discount. As giving interest? No.
You give it to the kid, but you may not give it to the parent. And therefore it's not equal.
A seller can give a discount, which means basically I'm giving you an incentive. I'm paying you to buy my product. I'm giving you $5 back. Why not? That would be permissible. So the question is, can this really be compared to our case of the buyer? You could argue and say that the child and the parent are one entity. Parents are happy for the child to receive some nuts and seeds. There is a benefit there for the parents. They don't have to buy nuts and seeds if the shopkeeper is giving it to the kids.
That could be on the agent.
But it's like these
Right. The assumption here, it sounds like they're little kids that are gonna go for seeds and nuts.
It's like this whole recent thing that's gone on here between Coles and Woolworths. So the little collectibles Coles did. Every parent, even if you're a Woolworths shopper for 20 years, suddenly you spend 4 months shopping at Coles because the kids needed collectibles.
Correct.
Then Woolworths came out to the next thing, and that's the...
Correct.
This is it.
So the kids are deciding where you're shopping.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's right. And
it's
I would
very
say this is
clever
business as
retailer.
usual and this is fair.
That's-
Yeah. Okay. So let's for argument's sake say that here is an example of a buyer. Maybe it's slightly different, but it does seem that on the seller's side of things, because remember the prohibition of bribing is on the giver, the person who's giving the bribe, the person who is who's receiving the bribe. So our question here is on the kid who's receiving the seeds. Is he doing the wrong thing? Well, doesn't seem. What's he doing wrong? He was sent to buy meat in the shops. He's getting it. Obviously, the parent didn't say you have to go to this shop or that shop. He's going to the market to get this. He's doing nothing wrong. So again, a buyer is representing a company to buy products. The buyer is receiving an incentive from the company to buy from me and not from them. But are they doing their job? Seems to be. They're receiving a gift.
Does it matter if you're a child or an adult?
Would it?
Yeah.
It's not the same entity getting the two things, it is with the nuts.
Okay, so the question is then, the kid definitely keeps the nuts. If in the case of a buyer, does the buyer get to keep the gift? That's really our question now. If I'm the buyer representing a company, it's not my money, it's the company's money that I'm spending. And I'm receiving a gift to spend their money here. Can I keep that gift?
Well, no, because there's contracts.
Oh, so let's have a look. There's a Gemara in Ksubas that says the following. Rav Papa stated, the law is that a bonus given for an object to a agent, to a buyer, basically, not to the owner. So we've got person A who sent person B to go and shop for them, to buy for them, and the seller gave person B, the agent, a gift, a bonus. They threw in something extra. If the object that was being bought has a fixed value, then the bonus has to be divided between the agent and the principal owner of the money. But if the bonus was on an object that had no fixed value, all of it goes to the owner, the buyer, original buyer, not the agent. Okay? So what does that mean? If you're going to buy something that has a fixed value, gold, let's say, there's a certain price by weight of gold. So somebody has sent you to buy gold, and the various sellers of gold are giving out gifts to the agent. So in such a case, the agent has to split the gift with the person who sent him to buy. But if you're buying something that doesn't have a set value, a house, land, there's no exact set value per square meter of land. The land is not priced. So if, let's say, you're on behalf of somebody buying an apartment, an investment apartment, and the seller says, you know what, buy my apartment, I'll throw in a dishwasher and a dryer. I'll throw it in. So who gets the dishwasher and dryer? The original buyer, the person whose money is buying this, not the agent. Why? What's the difference between the two? Because the question is, that merchandise, the bonus that's being given, is that being thrown in above the sale? Or is it a part of the sale itself? Is it being sold with it? In other words, is it a gift to entice you and say thank you? It's an extra gift to say thank you. So, or is it I'm throwing it in to bring the price down? You're getting more for your money. If it's a gift over and above, so then there's a debate why we split it into two. One opinion is that we don't know the intention of the giver of the gift. Are they giving it to say thank you to you, agent, for choosing me, or thank you to the person you're representing for buying from me? We don't really know what the intention is, so you've got to split it. Because it's a gift to say thank you. Whereas if it's bringing the price down, I'm giving you more for your money, so whose money is it? It's the owner's money. It's not the representative. So if the representative can't keep it. So, going back to our case, we've got somebody who is a buyer on behalf of the company. They're buying merchandise. What is the nature of the gift being given? It's not giving you a lower price for it's enticing you to buy. So according to that, they have to split it. He can't keep it all, but he could keep some of it. Because there is some advantage he's giving. I'm choosing you.
But doesn't a company contract trump that?
So what that means is that this buyer has to be completely open and transparent to his employer and say, this is what I've been given.
And if it's trumped, you give it all to him by the company.
And if that would happen, if the buyer's being transparent with his employer and saying, I've been given a $5,000 little gift for you to spend your $1 million buying merchandise from this person, if he's being open about it, so then what's the problem? What issue is there? If the employer is fine with it, and then Jewish law would say, so you have to do half-half, because, and then that would be fine. I would have a feeling that in every buyer-employer relationship there is in the contract that you can't do any of this. That these days, that you cannot take gifts, kickbacks, any of these type of things that will be legal. But assuming it wasn't, or assuming it wasn't in the contract or wasn't illegal, but he has to be totally open about it. If he's not being open about it, if he's taking money to spend somebody else's money, so then that would already be quite dodgy. In fact, it could be even worse. It could be considered stealing. If this buyer has not got the best intentions of his employer, if he's not looking out for the best deal, if he's buying from this person because he's getting a gift, whereas he could have got a better price and a better product somewhere else, so then that in fact has been dealt with in Jewish law. Such an exact case, almost exact case. The Divrei Chaim, Rabbi Chaim of Sons, he was from the 1800s, also in Poland. He had a case, a fascinating one, and with this we'll conclude, where there was a piece of property that belonged to somebody who couldn't look after it. Either it was a minor, maybe it was a child who had inherited property, and so an agent was appointed to look after this property. Let's say it was a house. The agent rented out the house to somebody, to a renter. However, strangely, gave them a very, very low rate, a low rent. And also strangely, received a gift of 30 rubles from the person renting this house. And then there was a fire and the house burnt down. So now the question came, who is responsible now for this house at the moment? Whose house is it? A rental property that burnt down and you're renting it. So you're responsible for the damage. Yes. But if the rent itself, the lease itself was an invalid deal, so then it's not yours. So now we're worried about the real owner of this property now has now lost their property because it went on fire. But the question is it their property or is it rented out to somebody else when it burnt down? And therefore, who's lost the property? So if the deal was valid, if the lease was valid, so then the renter has lost their property. But if it was an invalid deal in the first place, so then it never went to them. It belongs to the original. And in this case, the agent who rented out at a lower rate to the going rate because they received a bribe. So is that a valid deal? So says the Divrei Chaim, certainly not. It is absolutely not a valid deal. If they not only took a gift and rented something out at the disadvantage of the owners of the property, that is called stealing, he says. That is thievery. You're taking money that does not belong to you. And that invalidates the entire deal, and that the agent is responsible for the loss. Which would mean here as well, if a buyer is not representing the best interests of their employer, and buying something because they're getting something for themselves, that is actually stealing. That is totally stealing and completely unacceptable. However, I would say if it would be legal and in the contract he could disclose what he's doing to his employer, then it's between them and they can do whatever they want. So what it goes back to is, my friend is in a bit of trouble. I don't think he can be offering nice big gifts to these buyers that certainly their employer knows nothing about, and they're keeping it all for themselves, and therefore they're not necessarily buying the best things for them, which means that we still have a few $100,000 to raise for our shul. Thank you.